Hi, hello, how are you? I feel like it's a little bit late for this video, seeing as it is now, it's 22nd September. It's just a little over a week left, but I thought it would be good to share some short books in September that you could read, well, not just in September, but for the rest of the spooky season. I've got a mix of gothic classics and general classics, poetry, plays, and fun little short stories that take on a mystery and thriller vibe, as well as horror, which I can recommend to you. And I'll be reading some of these hopefully this season as well. So let's just get into it. The first one I'm going to recommend is The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. I'm not a professional, so this is, all of the books will be flipped around, but we're just gonna go with it. But this is actually the father of Gothic literature and fiction. The Castle of Otranto is recognized as the first Gothic work, and actually the castle in it, Horace Walpole in later life built an entire mansion in Richmond, London, called Strawberry Hill House, which itself has inspired a lot of Gothic settings in fiction and stories. But this starts with the tale of Manfred, an Italian prince whose son has just died in a pretty gory and disgusting way, and he's like, I've got no heir, so I'm gonna marry my son's betrothed and get an heir. And in doing so, he inadvertently releases a curse or prophecy that the castle's ancestors and previous occupants had faced, and a series of really disturbing and chilling supernatural events occurs. And I'm really excited to read this. I've had this for a couple of, like, 2 years, and the print is pretty slim and thin, but the book itself is also pretty slim. It's under 100 pages, but I think this is going to be a good read to start off the season with. The next one I have is a collection of short stories. This is The Demon Lover by Shirley Jackson. I actually think Shirley Jackson, apart from being a really great American author and author of horror and mystery and thriller, is a great person to just read in general. All of her novels are so good. Even though this is a collection of short stories, you can read one of her other novels. I read not The Haunting of Hill House. I have to read The Haunting of Hill House. But We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I read that a couple of years ago, and to this day it's probably still one of my favorite novels that I've ever read and would recommend to everyone, and also is one that I go back to and reread happily. So I would really recommend that. That is about it's narrated by, I think, a 14-year-old girl. She's quite young, she's still teenage, but she's mentally, like, even younger, and it's told through her eyes and viewpoint. And she's basically lives with her elder sister in their secluded giant mansion that she calls, you know, her castle, and she says that we've always lived here, we will always live here, and I'm just gonna go and get my stuff. Her sister's a bit of a recluse, she doesn't leave the house. It is known that some event happened a couple of years prior that caused the deaths of the other members of her family under suspicious circumstances, and for that reason the townsfolk are very, like, leery and, you know, suspicious of them. They treat our protagonist in kind of a weird way for, you know, this is a young teenage girl, but she's very blasé about it. She doesn't really care. She's like, well, they mean nothing to me, these people. I just care about me and my sister and our house and us living together. And as the novel progresses, you're like, something's not quite right, and then a very distant family relative arrives at their doorstep and is like, I'm here to take care of you and solve all your problems. And the elder sister is like, oh, you know, she's still kind of not all there, but she's kind of going through the motions and being accepting of it and accepting this help and, you know, preparing the house and stuff. And the younger sister really, our protagonist, does not like this intrusion. So it kind of follows that, and wow, the reveal as the story goes on and the way the story ends is so good. It's so creepy, it's so chilling, and it's really a favorite for me, so I would definitely recommend that. But I will be reading this spooky season. And yeah, I mean, this is a collection of short stories. This is one of the new Penguin classic editions that have come out, and I think honestly any of those would be a good pick. I was interested in The Burial of Rats by Bram Stoker as well, which is a piece that he wrote kind of when he was fleshing out and outlining Dracula, so I think that would be super interesting. But this is, yeah, a collection of Shirley Jackson's short stories along with The Demon Lover. There's a couple in there, and The Demon Lover is about this guy that she meets, and she's like, it's terribly important that I get in touch with the gentleman who may have stopped in here to buy flowers this morning. Terribly important. It's about this guy that she meets who isn't quite as he seems, but she's up in her head about it. So again, I don't know too much about it, but I think it's gonna be super interesting, and I just love Shirley Jackson. So yeah, next one I have to recommend is 17 Poison Englishmen by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is 4 tales in this, and this is already like pitifully thin, so I really like, and I don't even think that the writing is that small. Like, I think that's a decent number of pages, but I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez is an author who needs no introduction. In terms of magical realism and written style of prose, he receives so much, you know, praise and stuff, and he's a very popular author here on YouTube and just in the world in general, so I'm not really going to go too in depth into this. But yeah, this is a tiny book. This is a tiny collection. I don't know how there's like 4 different tales in this, but I've had this for a while and I think I need to read it. I need to get into short books. The next thing I would recommend reading is, I mean, short tales wise, is I think it would be a really good time to read some plays and poetry. The first one I'm going to recommend is extremely seasonal, and that's Autumn Journal by Louis MacNeice. Louis MacNeice is a Scottish writer. The first thing I read by him was Prayer Before Birth, and that's a really dark and grim poem about, you know, this unborn child, and he's speaking to you, you know, the audience, and he's saying like, oh, I'm not yet born. Don't ruin me in your world with all your terrible vices and sins and the way you people are so bad to each other. And, you know, kind of going over all these bad morals that we have in this world, and, you know, contrasting that desire for innocence while knowing I am going to commit wrong and I'm going to be swept up in all of this, and why are you doing this to me? But forgive me, please, before I even commit any of these sins. So that was a really impressionable poem for me. So when I saw this, I was like, I have to do this. I have to read this, because not only is he a great writer, I mean, just, I think these editions, these Faber editions, are so gorgeous. So I had to read it, especially because it's called Autumn Journal. Written between August and December 1938, Autumn Journal is still considered one of the most valuable and moving testaments of living through the 30s by a young writer. It is an impromptu record of the author's emotional and intellectual experience during those months, the trivia of everyday living set against the events of the world outside, the settlement in Munich, and slow defeat in Spain. He completely seizes the atmosphere of the year of Munich. He tolls the knell of political 30s with melancholy triumph. Whoops. So yeah, as you can see, it's all written in verse form, so I think this is going to be really interesting to read. I'm planning on reading this a little bit later into the season, maybe more towards November, and maybe even bleeding into December, and I just think it's going to be a really fun experience. Other pieces of poetry I would recommend, I really like Warsan Shire's poems, so I picked up this collection which is called Bless the Daughter Raised by a Voice in Her Head, and I flipped through it and I really liked a couple of the poems, and yeah, I just think she's so great. I mean, she's probably better known for her collaborations with Beyonce on Lemonade, and then post Lemonade collaborations as well. I think I didn't like the post Lemonade collaboration so much. I liked some of the ones on Lemonade, but her work prior to that and outside of that is really, really good. So it's a lot about, you know, stumbling towards womanhood while being isolated and independent in your journey, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, you know, that's something I'm reading. Maybe you want to read too. Otherwise, I think something really cozy to read in this season would be a collection of love poems. I have Blushing, which is collected by Paul B. Janeczko. And this is a really cute collection because it starts from, you know, just, it's divided up into a couple of sections, and he's collected poems relating to each section. So you have a section of just first love at first sight, and the first time I saw you, and just liking someone and having a crush on them. Yeah, so the beginning of love. And then the second section is being in love. The third one is alone love, so unrequited love, feelings of loss and heartbreak. The fourth one is the end of love, so breakups. And then the fifth one is remembering love. And I just thought, you know, this is a really cute and creative collection on love poems. I just really liked it. I would really recommend something like this. Now, I also think plays are a really good thing to read in this time. You can find a lot of longer plays as well, but, you know, I think in general plays can tend to be short if they're not ones you're going really in-depth into. Like, of course, Macbeth and Hamlet are two really obvious recommendations for the season, but I do think they don't fall into the category of short books or short reads, because I think there's just so much going on that you get so immersed and you want to read closely. So I feel like that's not a short book reading experience. But I would recommend Twelfth Night, which is about a pair of siblings, Viola and Sebastian. Viola they're on a ship making a voyage. They got caught in a terrible storm on sea, and they wash up on shore on different ends of the beach, unbeknownst to each other, and they both think, oh no, the other's dead. So Viola, she decides to like go to wherever they've washed up, and she cuts off her hair and pretends that she's Sebastian, and she like ingratiates herself into society. This like lord's daughter falls terribly in love with Sebastian, and Viola, in Sebastian disguise, is just kind of like letting it go on just so, you know, she can get some money and keep looking for her brother. And Sebastian in the meantime washes up, and he's like, what's going on? He enters the scene way later once Viola's set a bunch of things in motion, and obviously the people in the town mistake him for Viola as Sebastian, and he just kind of goes along with it as well. But, you know, other people can kind of tell, they're like, something's not quite right here, because he doesn't know what's going on. So it's a really funny tale. I mean, Shakespeare is just funny, and I think it's so fun to read things written in verse. So I would really recommend that. I think that's a really good thing to read. Another one I will recommend is Richard II by Shakespeare. So yeah, it's another Shakespeare. I studied this in high school, and this is also a pretty comedic play. It's a bit longer, but it's about, you know, the political intrigue in the lead up to the War of the Roses between the Lancasters and the Yorks for the throne. And it starts with Richard II, who is this really like pompous king, prone to outbursts, and he's like just living a bit of a hedonistic life. He's eating up the royal treasury, he's spending all of, you know, the taxes on his own pleasures and stuff, but at the same time he really wants to cling onto his crown, and he gets kind of insecure about that. But his advisors kind of like have been leading him astray, and the rest of the royal family is like, oh my god, this is so bad, but we can't say anything against our king. And the play starts off with him banishing two of his cousins for the accusations of treason both have committed against each other, and he just banishes them, even though that's maybe against the advice of everyone else. And the banishment, when they, you know, one of them ends up coming back, and he's like, well, fuck Richard, I'm taking over the throne, and there's a bit of a coup. So it's a really interesting play, and I would really recommend. I really loved it. I watched a production of it recently starring Johnny Bailey, and it was so good. It was so good to see something I've read and studied, you know, performed live, and they really amped up not only the political drama but the comedic elements as well, and it was just so good. So I would really recommend. And if you like reading verse as well, another play that I can recommend is Faust by Goethe. There are 3 parts to Faust. I've only read part 1, but it is about the Faustian bargain, i.e. the deal with the devil. And Goethe tells it sort of in a moralistic sense, because at this time Lutheran Christianity was kind of on the rise, and, you know, it was kind of the age of reason and enlightenment philosophies going on in Europe, and specifically Germany. So it's kind of told in a reactionary way to the rise of those philosophies and movements. But it starts off with Dr. Faust, who's this like, you know, very well respected aging academic, and he's like, oh, I'm just so bored, I've studied everything I know, I philosophized about it all, what else is there to do in the world, I've got nothing to do and this is all I do. And the devil appears and he's like, what if I make you immortal and give you magical powers and you can travel around the world and blah blah blah. And Faust's like, yeah, and I'm still gonna be a cool guy and I'll do that, I really will do that because I'm so bored, and who is God anyway? It's not in front of me, but you are. And yeah, he does commit some immoral things and he starts having, you know, struggles with what he's committed and seeing the consequences of his actions or his follies as he's committed while drunk on this power and this like new life that he's living. So, and it's written entirely in verse, and really beautiful verse. Actually, we'll see what translation I have. Yeah, I have the Wordsworth Classics version, and edited by Tom Griffith, translated by John R. Williams. So I really enjoyed it when I read it. It's just really good. It's just really good. I did it for a class where we were discussing depictions of the devil throughout literature, and this one was really fun. This one was really, really fun, so I would recommend. In a similar vein, another book that I'd read for that class was Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This copy has some other tales in it. Heart of Darkness itself is under 100 pages, and it's about, it's about European imperialism within Africa. I believe it's the Belgian Empire in Congo. But it starts with our protagonist, Christopher Marlowe, setting off sail from London to go meet a captain stationed in the Congo, and I think it's a Belgian captain, and he's being sent off on a mission because the exploits in Congo have not been going so smoothly, but this is one of the few who has, you know, managed to make some ground. But in the same sense, like, he's kind of disappeared and they're not getting that much, and other people who have been sent haven't really come back. And they go in, and this is so atmospheric. I mean, it really does feel like you're traveling into just darkness, and it is again a commentary on evil and, you know, the things we do for power and the way it can corrupt us. And it's a really chilling, haunting read. I remember reading it and being like, oh my god, like, this is hard to get through. And I just think it's a good spooky read, especially when the days start getting shorter and it's like really dark outside in the evenings. I think this is a good read, and it's an important read as well because this is critical and satirical of the European conquest in Africa, and you don't really get so much of that sometimes in literature all the time. But this is really interesting because you leave finishing the book, you're like, it's so obvious that, you know, European imperialism is the face of evil and the devil in this context. But being introduced into this setting, they talk about the local as unhappy savages, and, you know, that these are the faces of evil. So that contrast and, like, you know, the illumination you get by the end of the novel, I think it's really good. This is a classic I would really recommend. A slightly more cozy one is Silas Marner by George Eliot. George Eliot also wrote Mill on the Floss, and it's and Middlemarch as well. Yes, Middlemarch as well. I think it's really important to, I love reading female writers who wrote under male pseudonyms, just because I feel like so many, okay, let me explain. I feel like so many of these, when I'd see their names, I'd just be like, that's just another man. I didn't know how many of them were women writing under pseudonyms. So yeah, anyways, Silas Marner by George Eliot is a classic tale of an outsider. A weaver who comes to live and work alone in the Midlands village of Raveloe, Silas Marner's sole pleasure is to count his growing hoard of gold. When it is stolen, his life ceases to have meaning, until Eppie wanders into the weaver's cottage one snowy New Year's Eve and falls asleep on his hearth. Eppie is 2 years old. Silas rears the little girl with a friendly help from the villagers, and she loves him as a father. Then, after 16 years of contentment, Eppie's true background comes to light. So this is kind of like Ebenezer's Scrooge, but with a heart and some mystery reveal. And again, this isn't a very long novel. My copy is it's under 200 pages. Okay, this is like on the longer end of my list of recommendations so far, but I do think it would be a really nice cozy read, and just something a little bit less ghosty and supernatural than a lot of the other recommendations on this list, which I have a lot of because that's what I like reading year round. But I think this would be a nice reprieve as well. I also have The Waste by Virginia Woolf. I haven't read this. I admittedly have not read a lot of Woolf since I was younger, but I do want to start picking up some here and there. I do think I sometimes struggle with her stream of consciousness writing, but I need to get used to it. Just because it's a personal dislike doesn't mean she doesn't write good stories. And this is really nice because it's set by the sea, and I do feel like that gives a bit of a autumnal vibe. I don't know, to me it does, especially as we're still technically in, you know, late summer, early autumn. I think this is a good time to read this. It's about 6 children who meet in a garden close to the sea, and, you know, the subsequent continuity of these 6 main characters as they develop from childhood to maturity and follow different passions and ambitions, interspersed with interludes from the timeless and unifying course of nature. In pure stream of consciousness style, Woolf presents a cross-section of multiple yet parallel lives, each marked by the disintegrating force of a mutual tragedy. The Waves is her searching exploration of individual and collective identity and the observations and emotions of life, from the simplicity and surging optimism of youth to the vacancy and despair of middle age. Yeah, I'm really interested to read this because this is supposed to be one of her best works, and it's also her 8th novel. So, yeah. Do you know what? I feel like people really hate on Wordsworth classics, but I really like all of the copies I have. Maybe just because they're kind of old. I don't know. Maybe the newer versions are not so nice. Oh god. Ooh, okay, this one's a bit dirty on the side, but it's okay. Okay, my final 2 books. Again, this one is a bit longer than the rest, and maybe I should not put this in here. It's about 150 pages, and that's Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. Really nice cover and red sprayed edges. But I started reading this, and I was in a bit of a reading slump, so I didn't continue it, but it is written in classic absurd Lemony Snicket style. And it really starts off with this guy having breakfast, and he's like, shit, I just consumed poison. How does he know? I don't know, he just knows. We'll probably find out later, but he's looking at his breakfast and he's like, well, I don't have much time, so I need to figure out in which of the items the poison was, how did it get there, what else it contaminated, what exactly the poison was, and is there an antidote? I don't think there's an antidote. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's no antidote, and he's just trying to solve things. Yeah. He's just trying to solve how it happened before his ultimate demise. But yeah. Actually, no, it's not that he realizes he ate poison. He gets a note saying, you just ate poison. So I'm interested to read this. Again, like I said, I started this a while ago and I forgot about it kind of and pushed it to the side, so I would like to finish it. And then the last one I have, I don't really want to read this, but I've had it on my shelves for so long that I think I just need to. So it's not necessarily a recommendation, but more me, I need to read this, and that's Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is a pretty nice copy, and like I said, it's really short. I think it's under 100 pages, but I think, you know, I'm just gonna read the back. Even though we all know I feel like everyone knows what it's about, and that's why I think I haven't even ever picked it up, because I already know what it's about, and I have no curiosity to pick up and read it anyways. Mr. Jones of Manor Farm is so lazy and drunken that one day he forgets to feed his livestock. The ensuing rebellion under the leadership of the pigs, Napoleon and Snowball, leads to the animals taking over the farm. Vowing to eliminate the terrible inequities of the farmyard, the renamed animal farm is organized to benefit all who walk on 4 legs. But as time passes, the ideals of the rebellion are corrupted and then forgotten, and then something new and unexpected emerges. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we all know what it's about, and I'm not too impressed by idealizing socialism and communism anyway. So I'm just really not interested in reading this, but I feel like it's just one of those books I have to, especially because it is on my shelf, and I think I will just be unhauling it once I read it, but I just have to read it. This is one I just have to read it before the year ends so that it's not there anymore. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any short book recommendations. Ooh, one more that I do have is a collection of short stories that I read a couple of months ago and raved about in my book review, and I think I raved about it in another video as well, but it was a collection of short stories by Paget. I don't remember what the title was because I know it was a British library collection, but I will put it in the description. Again, those are kind of chilling, supernatural, ghosty stories, and her prose is so beautiful and lush and really descriptive and immersive, and there's still quite a bit of nature in it and like crumbling Italian countryside castles and stuff, so I think that's a really good read for this season as well. Like, that's perfect. So I will also put that in the description. But thank you for watching. Let me know what you think, if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are, and if you have any recommendations for me. Bye.